So apparently, the internet has decided Superman might be next on Hollywood's sacrificial altar of modern audience reinvention. Yeah, Superman. Not officially, obviously. DC hasn't announced a non binary Superman. Most of this came from fake leaks, social media rumors, rage bait headlines, and people just farming outrage for engagement. But honestly, the fact so many people immediately believed it says something important. Audiences no longer trust Hollywood to leave iconic characters alone. And this actually connects directly to what I talked about in my Harry Potter reboot video because the deeper issue was never just Harry Potter, or Superman in this case.
I'm back still.
It's the growing feeling that modern entertainment no longer creates cultural icons organically. It recycles existing ones, reshapes them around whatever conversation dominates online for 5 minutes, and calls that innovation. Because at this point, it kind of feels like nothing is allowed to simply exist as itself anymore. Everything has to be updated, reframed, reinterpreted. Batman becomes Batperson. The Fantastic Four becomes the emotionally diverse collective. Spider Man identifies as a web based community organizer running trauma support groups between multiverse collapses. And obviously, I'm exaggerating. Mostly. But the reason those jokes even land anymore is because audiences no longer think this kind of thing sounds impossible. And now, every major franchise instantly becomes ideological discourse before a script even exists. The second people started fan casting Hunter Schafer as Princess Zelda, the internet exploded into the exact same cycle. Is this meaningful representation? Is this forced? And why does everything become discourse now? And honestly, I think a growing number of people are just exhausted by all of it. Not because audiences automatically hate change, but because entertainment increasingly feels less focused on storytelling and more focused on engineering reactions. Studios realize something incredibly profitable. People who argue online still buy tickets. So every reboot, redesign, and controversial casting rumor becomes free marketing before production even starts. And after years of reboots, nostalgia bait, and non-stop discourse, audiences have become skeptical of everything, not just Superman, which raises a bigger question. Are audiences actually becoming intolerant of change, or are people reacting to the growing feeling that stories are no longer being written to emotionally connect with audiences, but to strategically manage them? Let's talk about it.
MitchCraft Online, come on in. Join the talk. Let's begin.
Now, let's establish facts before someone decides to write a doctoral thesis in my comment section while aggressively sipping iced coffee. There is currently no official announcement about Superman becoming non binary or transgender or anything like that. Most of this discourse came from speculation, fake edits, fan theories, and people just farming outrage. But again, the reason people believed it so easily says a lot about where entertainment culture currently is. Audiences no longer trust studios to preserve the emotional core of legacy characters. And yeah, Hollywood earned that distrust because modern adaptations sometimes feel more interested in updating symbolism rather than preserving identity. Now, compare the different Superman interpretations we've had. Zack Snyder's Superman with Henry Cavill, it felt mythological, heavy, almost godlike. That version leaned hard into Superman as an alien burdened by humanity, carrying expectation like Atlas wearing a cape. The visuals felt massive, operatic, almost biblical at times. Whether people loved or hated Snyder's version, it at least felt, intentional. Then you look at James Gunn's Superman. Gunn's version seemed a lot lighter, warmer, more emotionally expressive, less tortured demigod, and more hopeful farm boy trying to do good in a chaotic world. And honestly, that tonal shift is completely fine because changing tone is not the same thing as destroying identity. Audiences will follow almost any reinterpretation if the emotional soul of the character still feels intact. Then you have Tyler Hoechlin's Superman in Superman and Lois. That version worked for a lot of people because it felt human, not performatively human, actually human. He struggled as a father, as a husband, as a provider, as a man balancing extraordinary responsibility with ordinary family life. That show understood something modern writing sometimes forgets. Relatability matters more than ideological performance. Clark and Lois felt like real parents trying to survive teenage chaos while also preventing world ending disasters before dinner. There was warmth in that show, charm, emotional grounding. The point is, everything new is bad. The point is, good writing still wins. So, people embrace change when the emotional truth of a character still feels recognizable. But once audience starts feeling like identity politics become more important than character depth, that's when the disconnect begins. Disney has basically industrialized nostalgia at this point. Every few months, another childhood classic gets pulled onto a conveyor belt, emotionally pressurized for modern sensibilities, and then released back into the wild wearing the cinematic equivalent of a corporate LinkedIn smile. The real problem is that modern studios increasingly confuse visibility with substance. Representation can absolutely enrich storytelling, but representation is not a substitute for storytelling. Audiences can instantly feel the difference between a character written from emotional truth and a character assembled from marketing objectives. You still need believable characters, emotional weight, conflict, chemistry, stories that feel lived in instead of focus grouped by executives studying engagement graphs like ancient prophecy scrolls.
The alignment of the stars a change. It is exactly as the ancients written.
That's where many reboots collapse because instead of asking, how do we tell a compelling story? They ask, how do we optimize this for discourse? Those are completely different creative instincts. This is why certain older shows still resonate emotionally, even when they're cheesy, supernatural, or completely ridiculous. Take the original Charmed series from Aaron Spelling. Yeah, it was a show about witches fighting demons every week while wearing enough late 90s leather to bankrupt an entire cow population. But underneath the magic, it understood something human.
He's a computer programmer. He works with numbers all day. You know how Phoebe is with math? They have absolutely nothing in common.
The Halliwell sisters felt believable, their chemistry mattered, their arguments felt personal, their love for each other felt very real. The emotional core of the show was family. Even their powers literally became stronger through sisterhood itself.
Come on, we've got to stay together. Power of three will set us free. The power of three will set us free.
That's meaningful writing, and what made the show work wasn't just spells and demons, it was the balance between fantasy and ordinary life dating, bills, work stress, loss, trying to protect family while chaos constantly exploded around them. People connected to that emotional realism. You believe these women loved each other, and once audiences emotionally believe relationships, they'll forgive almost anything else. Then the Charmed reboot happened, because that's what we're calling it.
What's the matter? I don't know. This whole thing is just sort of odd. It doesn't make any sense.
And instead of naturally building from the emotional blueprint of the original, the reboot often felt more interested in signaling its themes than emotionally earning them. The original series trusted audiences to absorb its ideas through relationships. The reboot, however, sometimes felt like it needed audiences to constantly notice its ideas instead. That's the issue. Not female leads, not diversity, not modernization, emotional authenticity. When writers prioritize messaging over emotional truth, audiences eventually disconnect no matter how progressive the intentions are. Studios constantly talk about appealing to modern audiences, but most audiences still want what people have always wanted: emotional honesty. The problem starts when storytelling begins feeling psychologically engineered instead of emotionally sincere. Audiences can usually sense when storytelling comes from genuine creative passion versus when it feels assembled by committee. Real human beings are messy, contradictory, emotional, irrational. But modern corporate storytelling sometimes feel terrified of that messiness. Everything becomes optimized, sanitized, carefully calibrated to avoid backlash while still generating engagement. And ironically, the harder studios try to appear culturally perfect, the less emotionally human their stories sometimes feel. People are exhausted by performance, especially when sincerity starts feeling replaced by branding strategy, pretending to be emotional authenticity. That is why audiences keep gravitating back toward older films and shows. Not because older media was flawless, God knows it wasn't, but because many older stories still felt emotionally sincere before every franchise became a branding strategy. The backlash today feels stronger because audiences increasingly feel like nothing is protected from reinterpretation anymore. Every mythology, every franchise, every iconic character, everything feels one corporate strategy meeting away from ideological renovation. Now, obviously, some people online absolutely overreact. There are people who experience full spiritual collapse because a background character has pronouns. That exists. But pretending every criticism automatically comes from hatred is intellectually lazy too. Sometimes people simply dislike unnecessary changes to characters they emotionally grew up with. What makes the backlash emotionally intense is that these franchises stopped being just entertainment a long time ago. Characters like Superman became modern mythology. People inherited them emotionally from childhood. Parents passed them to kids. Entire generations attach pieces of themselves to these stories. So, when audiences feel those characters are being fundamentally reinterpreted, the reaction becomes emotional, not just political. And the more companies dismiss criticism instead of honestly engaging with it, the more hostile the relationship between people and entertainment becomes. Studios spent years pouring fuel onto discourse for engagement, and now they're standing inside the fire acting confused about why audiences seem cynical. The deeper issue underneath all of this is identity becoming the dominant lens through which modern storytelling gets filtered. Everything now becomes categorized first: race, gender, sexuality, representation metrics. And while representation absolutely has its place, the greatest characters connect because they feel human first, not because a corporation successfully color coded a marketing spreadsheet. The reason certain stories survive generations is because they tap into emotional experiences almost everyone understands: loneliness, sacrifice, hope, fear, wanting to belong somewhere.
You asked me to marry you, and I did. You wanted a family, and I gave you a son. And now you want me to watch you just walk away?
It's not that simple.
Then make it simple.
The more specific the emotional truth becomes, the more universal the story often feels. That is why audiences connect to characters across race, gender, and culture all the time. Emotional authenticity travels further than branding ever will. So, is Super Them actually coming? Probably not. At least not literally. Most likely, the Superman discourse is internet exaggeration mixed with legitimate distrust toward Hollywood trends. But the fact people believe these rumors so easily says a lot about where entertainment culture currently is. People no longer fully trust studios to preserve the emotional core of legacy characters. And yeah, Hollywood definitely earned some of that skepticism because too many modern adaptations feel more interested in cultural signaling than timeless storytelling. People miss sincerity, not perfection, sincerity. Sometimes people just want stories that feel emotionally honest instead of strategically engineered for online approval. And maybe that's why so many people keep revisiting older movies and older shows lately. Not because older media was flawless, but because a lot of it still felt human. But I want to know what you think. Do you think these Superman rumors are just internet rage bait? Or do you think Hollywood genuinely is moving toward radically reinterpreting iconic characters in ways we're all growing tired of? And where do you personally draw the line? Are race swaps and gender swaps harmless creative evolution, or are studios relying too heavily on existing icons instead of creating entirely new characters people can organically connect with? Drop your thoughts below because honestly, this conversation says way more about modern culture than just superheroes. At the end of the day, people don't fall in love with stories because they check demographic boxes. They fall in love with stories because they mean something, because they connect to something timeless inside people. Hope, loneliness, sacrifice, family, fear, love, those things survive generations. Corporate trends do not. And when studios start treating beloved characters like endlessly customizable branding experiments instead of emotionally meaningful myths, people eventually stop trusting them. That's the danger here. Not diversity, not inclusion, creative emptiness, because maybe people are not rejecting change. Maybe they're rejecting the growing feeling that stories no longer mean anything. Stories are no longer written to move people, but to manage them. And once people emotionally disconnect from stories, no amount of branding, nostalgia bait, marketing campaigns, or online discourse can force that connection back. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, and share this with somebody else also exhausted by endless corporate remix era. And I'll see you in the next one.
MitchCraft Online, come on in, join the talk, let's begin.